Stop wasting money on expensive emergency meals full of scary ingredients you don't want to eat. Here's how to DIY it, because everything's better when you make it from scratch. Hey guys, it's Jara with Wicked Prepared. There are a lot of companies out there advertising their survival buckets and boxes, and many people buy these and stash them away in a closet or under the bed and feel like they've got their emergency preparedness taken care of. But if you take a deep dive into what you're actually getting in those kits, it's usually not what you think you're getting. Check out the ingredients list and you'll see a bunch of scary things that can hardly be described as food. And when people actually venture to try the meals inside, they usually realize pretty quickly why those companies intend you to stash those away and never open them. In this day and age, we have better options. We know everything is better when you make it from scratch. You control the ingredients, you control the flavor. But in an emergency, you're not going to be pulling out multiple ingredients and cooking up a complicated gourmet meal. You need something to bridge that gap. Something that's easy and emergency friendly, but also tastes good and has ingredients that you can feel good about eating. Meals in a jar is one of my favorite ways to accomplish this. These are the ultimate way to build a shelf-stable, nutritious, and convenient food supply. They leverage the power of real freeze-dried ingredients with their long shelf life and high nutritional value. They're shelf-stable for years, needing only water and a brief cooking time on your emergency stove to transform into a delicious meal full of real meat and real vegetables. And they're delicious. So delicious, you won't want to tuck them away and forget about them until you're desperate. You'll find yourself reaching for them over and over again when you need a quick, convenient meal. This will keep your stash rotated without even having to think about it and save you time and money in the long run. Today, I've got two brand new meal in a jar recipes to share with you. It's really two variations of one simple recipe to show you just how truly versatile these meals are. You'll want to stay tuned till the end of the video for some more ideas on making these even more versatile. The first recipe is a jerk chicken and rice. Jerk seasoning is a traditional spice blend used in Jamaican cooking. This is a delicious recipe combining savory, sweet, and tropical flavors while staying mild enough to appeal to just about every palate. Let's get started. We're not going to need any special equipment for this. This is not pressure canned. I'm just going to be using a wide mouth quart jar with a canning funnel. And then I just need my basic measuring cups and spoons, as well as a lid and ring for the jar. And for long-term storage, you're going to want to put a 200cc oxygen absorber in a jar this size is what I usually use. I will have links to everything I use down in the description box below the video to make it easy. For the jerk chicken and rice, the first ingredient we're going to use is freeze-dried chicken, and I'm using these chicken slices. This is my absolute favorite freeze-dried chicken right here because I just love the larger slices as opposed to a lot of the other chicken that I have that comes in much smaller dices. The thing with freeze-dried food is if you need a smaller piece, you can always break it or crush it. It's very easy. But you can't make it bigger, obviously. But this just ends up with such a wonderful flavor and texture, and it's kind of such a good change to have something like this in the prepper pantry, something other than canned chicken, because canned chicken always gets that shredded texture, which it definitely has its place, but for a lot of dishes, I prefer to have the slices. These will stay in nice tender slices and not shred up. I'm using 1 cup of the chicken. And next I'm using instant rice. Now this is instant jasmine rice. I'm using that in this recipe. You can use whatever instant rice that you want. You can use white rice, brown rice. That's pretty much what they have for instant rice, I believe. Instant rice is rice that's been cooked and then dehydrated, so it comes back to life. It cooks up extremely quickly. So you're going to want to use an instant rice and not substitute that for regular rice, long grain rice, because it would throw off your water amounts and your cook times a lot. I'm using 1 1/4 cups of the instant rice. There's 1 cup and 1/4 cup. I'm just going to give this a little bit of a jiggle to make sure that that rice gets down in among the chicken. It's going to leave us more space in the jar. Next, I'm adding some freeze-dried red bell pepper. These are slices, and they work out perfectly in this recipe. There's a 1/2 cup of freeze-dried bell pepper. And next, I'm adding freeze-dried chopped onion, 1/4 cup of the onion, and now I'm going to do my seasoning. So for this recipe, the main seasoning ingredient is going to be this Jamaican jerk seasoning. I'm going to use 2 teaspoons of the seasoning. This has a really, really neat smell and flavor. I went kind of middle of the road with this seasoning. It's not going to be super spicy because I know some people don't like that. So if you like your food more bold and more spicy, you can bump up the amount and do more of this, like maybe 2.5 teaspoons or a tablespoon. You can just play with it. The one thing I will say is if you do bump up the amount of the jerk seasoning, you might want to lower down the amount of bouillon. I'm putting in bouillon next because if you look at this seasoning, the first ingredient on it is salt. So this seasoning has salt, our bouillon has salt, so they both have salt. So I think this is perfectly salty as it is. So if you bump this up for a little bit more spice, then you might want to lower the bouillon a little bit. The other thing is you can get different brands of jerk seasoning and some of them are labeled as mild. This is the only one I've ever tried, but I'll put a couple other options down in the description box. There's one brand where you can get spicy or a mild. You can get them both in the same order. So you can try different things like that as well if you want to play with the heat amount. Next, I'm adding chicken bouillon, like I mentioned. 2 teaspoons of the bouillon as well. And I'm adding some freeze-dried minced garlic. 1 teaspoon of the garlic. Next, I'm adding some freeze-dried pineapple. So this is going to give a nice little sweet touch to this dish. Just a little sweet to contrast with the savory and spicy and all the other flavors. It's really good. This is pretty common to see in these Jamaican jerk recipes. I don't know whether it's a traditional ingredient, but I see it a lot. So 1/2 cup of the pineapple. And next I'm adding some coconut milk powder. This is going to give it a delicious flavor and a really nice creaminess. So there's 1/2 cup of the coconut milk powder. Now this is getting pretty full, so I'm going to go ahead and tap this a little bit to get all these ingredients settled down in. I have only one thing left to add, and that is some freeze-dried peas. I'm adding 1/2 cup of the peas. And that is the final ingredient, which is really good because it's pretty full. So for long-term storage, you would want to add your 200 cc oxygen absorber right into the top here and then just seal it up. I am not going to put this on the shelf. I'm actually going to cook this up right now to show you how this comes out. So I'm just going to put the lid right on without the oxygen absorber. You can also vacuum seal these. Some people do that. You don't need to do both. Both is overkill. If you do vacuum seal, make sure you protect from the powders being sucked up into the seal. I prefer the oxygen absorbers, but I've seen people do both. Now I just have to label this jar so that I know what's in it, and make sure you always have the recipe either attached to the jar somehow or at least printed out and kept in a binder or a folder or something like that, because if you are in an emergency and the power's out and you're reaching for these meals, you're not going to have the water amounts or the cooking times and stuff like that. It's super easy because it's really just add water and cook, but it's always good to have it written down because every meal is going to have different amounts of water and different times to cook. I sometimes like to write on the lids of my jars with a chalk marker, the same one that I use for my chalkboard labels. It actually works pretty well. I like to use these little chalkboard labels that I get from the Dollar Tree. They look super cute and they can be used over and over again. And there it is, ready to go on the shelf. But I am not going to put this one on the shelf today. I'm going to cook this up and show you how it comes out. I'm going to cook these meals today on my butane emergency stove. This is what I keep for cooking indoors if the power's out. It's inexpensive and it works really well. This is the fuel it uses. I've got my meal and I've got a medium saucepan here. I'm just going to open up my meal and empty it into the pan. And now I'm going to add my water. I'm going to be adding 3 1/4 cups of water. And I'm going to pour it into the jar first because you can see there's just a little bit of powder and seasonings that could be left behind in the jar. And I want to make sure that I get all of that into our dish so we don't lose any flavor. All right, so here's my 3 1/4 cups of water. I'm going to go ahead and stir this until everything is moistened. Now I'm going to go ahead and apply the heat. And I'm just going to have this up on full heat until this comes to a simmer, at which point I'm going to turn it down and cover it. And these cook up so quick and easy. Because it's minute rice, they really just need to be combined with that boiling water. And then that's all you need, just a little bit of time. I am going to simmer it for 5 minutes, and then I'm going to let it sit covered for about 10 minutes off the heat, and it will be finished. But if you were low on fuel, you could just bring the water to a boil and then turn it right off and let it sit a little longer. If you make a smaller version of this meal in a Mylar pouch, you can also just pour the boiling water in, put it inside of an insulated lunch bag to keep the heat in while it sets, and it'll be done in 15 or so minutes without even being on the stove. All right, now that I can see this coming to a simmer around the edges, I'm just going to give it one more stir. And I'm going to lower the heat and put the lid on it so that it can just simmer for 5 minutes at a low simmer. Remember, keeping the lid on is going to prevent loss of heat and loss of moisture. All right, 5 minutes has gone by, so I'm going to turn the heat off at this point. I'm going to open it up and I'm going to give it one more stir, making sure I get right into the edges of the pot. Press all that down into the liquid. And I'm just going to cover this back up, and it's going to sit here for 10 minutes. And after 10 minutes, it should be ready to go. All right, so it's been 10 minutes. Now let's see if this is ready. That is looking pretty good. This stays pretty creamy and moist because of the coconut milk. And I wanted to make sure there's plenty of moisture in here to get the chicken fully refreshed. But you can see this chicken is just breaking right apart. So it is definitely ready to eat. And I cannot wait. Yum, yum, yum. Okay, I'm going to serve this up. All right, I am ready to dig in. Oh, I love the flavor of this. This is so delicious. It's different. I've never had anything quite like this before. I don't know if it's as jerky as it's supposed to be, but I think the flavor of this is just perfect. I will say one thing you could do is you could always throw a little baggie or something with some extra seasoning in it and put it in the top of the jar so that if somebody wanted theirs a little bit spicier, they could add the seasoning on themselves. But this is absolutely perfect for me. So good. Next, I'm going to show you a different variation on this so you can see how easily just a couple of simple changes can create a whole different meal. This is going to be a coconut curry chicken and rice meal. So we're going to have an Asian-inspired meal as well as a Caribbean-inspired meal. Let's get started. For the coconut curry chicken and rice, I've got a clean mason jar and I've also got a clean funnel. I don't want to mix those flavors. That's just a personal thing for me. I have a lot of these funnels. They're only about $2 at Walmart. So I have stocked up on a bunch of them because sometimes it's really handy to just make up a whole bunch of these jars so you can really stock your shelves with a lot of meals. It's super fast and easy to just make up a bunch of jars if you do it assembly line style. But one of the hardest parts would be moving the funnel from jar to jar. So I just put a funnel in every jar. That's just the way I like to do it. It's also really handy to have a separate measuring scoop for each ingredient when you're doing that as well. I like to keep my measuring scoops separate or wash them in between just because I don't want to transfer the flavors. I don't want my red bell peppers tasting like coconut milk for the next recipe. So it's just a weird thing that I like to do. This recipe has most of the same ingredients. There's just a couple changes. So I'm just going to go through this really quick. We are starting with the chicken, 1 cup of chicken, and then the 1 1/4 cups of rice, the 1/2 cup of red bell peppers, a 1/4 cup of diced onion. Here's where it gets a little bit different. I'm going to be using my coconut curry seasoning instead of the jerk seasoning. For this one, I'm using 4 teaspoons, and that's the same as 1 tablespoon plus 1 teaspoon, because a tablespoon is 3 teaspoons. I get this coconut curry seasoning from Firehouse Flavors. That's an amazing place. I will put the link down in the description box below so you can go check out their store. So there's 4 teaspoons of the coconut curry seasoning. And then I'm also bumping up the chicken bouillon a little bit and using a tablespoon of that. The difference in this recipe between the jerk chicken is that the jerk seasoning has a lot of salt and the coconut curry seasoning is just curry and coconut milk. So it does not have the extra salt. Teaspoon of garlic, half cup of pineapple, our half a cup of coconut milk powder. Now there's one more place where I am going to change the recipe, and that's this last ingredient. Instead of peas, I'm going to do green beans. I just want something a little bit different, and it's just going to show how easy it is and how versatile these meals are, because you really can change them up just by changing up the seasonings and changing up the vegetables. A lot of the time you can make something entirely different so you don't get food fatigue if you are eating off of your stored meals for a long period of time. So I'm using a half a cup of the green beans. And our jar is full. Just enough room for the oxygen absorber and the lid. All ready to go on the shelf. But I am not going to put this on the shelf. I'm going to be cooking this one up to show you how it comes out. And the coconut curry chicken and rice is going to cook up just the same. So I'm just going to do this real quick so you can see how this one turns out as well. All right, let's dish it up. Look at all those meat and veggies. There is meat and veggies in every single bite of both of these dishes. All right, now let's give this one a try. This one's really good too. I love curry. I think if I had to pick a favorite out of these two, I would pick the jerk chicken because it's just different. It's something I've never tasted before and I really, really enjoyed it. But this is really delicious also. You can see how easy these meals are to make and to customize to your preference. These meals don't have to be made in jars. The jars sure look nice on the shelf and they are a non-toxic material. But if glass storage doesn't work for you, these meals can be stored in Mylar bags. If you add an oxygen absorber to the Mylar bag, you should get the same shelf life as the jars. The Mylar bags actually have the added benefit of blocking light, which can be an issue with the glass jars. You can even put the Mylar meal pouches into buckets if that's the kind of storage you prefer. Most quart jar meals like these make 3 to 4 servings. Now, if you have a small family and you don't need that much food at one time, it's easy to cut the recipes in half and make them in a pint-sized container. I've even quartered the recipes for single serving meals in a jar. This can be great not only for single people, but also for households where one family member has different eating habits or dietary needs than the rest. For bringing meals to help out a senior who lives alone, or for backpackers. Although I think sometimes a hungry backpacker is probably better off with the half recipe to replenish more calories. You can see the nutrition that's packed into these meals. You can control the ingredients and tailor them for your individual needs, which you can't do with the commercially prepackaged meals. I recommend whenever you try a new recipe like this that you make up one jar first, prepare it, try it, and serve it to your family to be sure that you like it, because everyone's tastes are different. Make any adjustments that you need to make it perfect for your family. Maybe you want more or less salt or seasoning, a different kind of vegetable, or you need to adjust the water amount or the cooking time. Make notes of what you change, and once you have it perfect to your taste, make up a bunch. Set out 6, 10, or 12 jars and really fill your shelves. I have a whole playlist and a web page full of different recipes, so you can have a variety of different meals on the shelf to choose from. And should disaster strike, you're going to be so thankful for a delicious meal that you can easily fix for yourself or your family. I guarantee you'll reach for these long before you drag out the rice and beans or those old 72-hour buckets. Check out the notes below the video for links to the ingredients and supplies that I used in today's video, as well as a link to my Facebook group where Meal in a Jar lovers share recipes, tips, reviews, and just a general love for prepping and shelf-stable meals. If you made it all the way to the end of the video, leave me a Jamaican flag emoji down in the comments and check out this playlist next for some more great recipes. I'm Jara with Wicked Prepared. Survive today, thrive tomorrow. We'll see you next time.